Welcome, everybody. My name is Paulina from ECDPM, an independent think tank working on inclusive and sustainable development in Africa and Europe. I've been working on food systems and the governance of food systems for a long time. And like many in the food world, we are very curious to see what is happening around the big UN Food Systems Summit that's happening on the 26th of September. But today I'm speaking with Professor Jessica Fanzo. She's a thought leader on everything food systems based at Hopkins University in the US, and Alejandro Guarin of the International Institute of Environment and Development based in London to talk about Jess and Lawrence Haddad's initiative to develop a monitoring framework for food systems transformation. Jess invited both Alejandro and me in the independent expert group, and we've been working on it for a couple of months now, and it's a very exciting project. We all agree on that. It's a monitoring framework that sets out the steps that are necessary to track progress on food systems towards the Sustainable Development Goals and hopefully beyond. So let's just start out with asking Jess, what is this about? You are one of the driving forces behind the famous food systems dashboard, but we really need a catchy name for this one. Do we already have it? And can you tell us something more about the initiative, why it was conceived? Yeah, just give it a go.
Great. Thanks for having me, Pauline. And it's nice to share this time with Alejandro as well. So we sought out to do something more than just the food systems dashboard, which brings maybe 220 indicators together across different elements and components of food systems and their drivers. And we were thinking that we, being Lawrence Haddad of the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, we're thinking that we need to do something better in the way of tracking the highest quality data to measure the performance of food systems. And we wanted to do this to increase the accountability of policymakers who are investing in food systems, so they understand what is their food systems doing, how are they performing, and how do they track commitments being made to improve those food systems. So the food systems monitoring project, it's not a great title at the moment, brings together about 50 experts who are tasked with coming up with a framework that is filled with the highest quality data across 5 thematic areas: diets, nutrition and health, environment and climate, livelihoods, poverty and equity, which is what Alejandro is a part of, governance, and then resilience and sustainability, which Paulina, you are a part of. So over the next year, we'll be working on a set of indicators that could track across those 5 thematic areas to allow for better governance, support accountability of food systems in this call for food system transformation that the UN Food Systems Summit is championing for. So stay tuned. Really, the idea is to really provide clarity on how do we measure food systems, how do we measure their performance, and how can people track how well food systems are doing over time.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. And maybe, Alejandro, I'm sure you can complement and also go into the link with the UN Food Systems Summit itself. You just touched upon it a bit, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more.
Maybe I'll leave the relationship with the summit and what this framework wants to do with regard to the summit. But maybe let me just, since Jessica has spoken about improvement, transformation, maybe just pause for a second to maybe remind our listeners what is it that needs to be improved and why. Why are we talking about a transformation? Why do we think that's necessary? Why do we need to monitor it? So I think there's a broad consensus now that the food system has, well, many challenges and problems, but I think really across 3 big issues. One is what is called broadly human health, and the idea that currently what we're eating is making a lot of us very sick. So the quality of the diets is not very high. Some people don't have enough to eat. Others are eating too much or too much processed food that is making them obese or resulting in all sorts of other um, health issues. So that's one big problem with the food system that needs improvement. The other would be that our current production systems are really destructive of the environment, and so that there is a need to create food systems that improve what is sometimes referred to as the planetary health. So we need more sustainable food systems, more sustainable forms of production that are not producing so many carbon emissions and destroying biodiversity, etc. And I think there's a separate issue, which is around just human dignity and livelihoods. And that in the course of all this stuff that we're producing, that a lot of people are being left behind. People continue to be very poor, particularly those involved in farming, but not exclusively. That there's lots of unequal access to resources and food. So that there's an issue of equality, of social justice in food systems that needs to be addressed. So I think that's in a way why we need this sort of system to see how we can improve its performance. So I think that I think is the logic behind coming up with a framework like that, and then how that we aim to shape or to hold the discussions of the Food Systems Summit accountable. I think Jessica can probably speak to that more.
Yeah, but with the food systems monitoring framework, we were hoping that it would become a more officialized accountability mechanism of the summit, but that hasn't been very clear how the summit will track commitments that are made on that day. So there's still an opportunity for this work that we're all engaged with to be meaningful to the summit, but it hasn't been endorsed as the official accountability mechanism. I don't think there is one at the moment, which is a bit unfortunate. One could argue that we already have an accountability mechanism, and that's the Sustainable Development Goals. But I don't think a lot of countries are tracking the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals either. My country, the United States, certainly does not. But so I think regardless, there needs to be some sort of way of, if all the member states and the UN and NGOs and CSOs and private sector all come together in New York in September and make bold commitments towards transforming their food systems in all the directions that Alejandro so nicely articulated, what happens the day after?
Yep.
It's great to pontificate and make bold statements that you're going to do this and you're going to do that and we're going to achieve this and we're all in this together. But then everyone goes home, and then what? We've been through this exercise many times. There's been many summits around hunger, many summits around food security, and we're basically where we were more than a decade ago, with the number of hungry people, with extra complexity of obesity and NCDs moving around the world, so non-communicable diseases moving around the world. So, and climate change barreling down on us. So now what, right? So my question is, are these global goal settings and global summits meaningful? Do they elicit change? Do they elicit action? Do these summits matter for the Malawi mom who's toiling every day on her hectare of maize? Does she see the results of these grand global visions and commitments? And I think many of us can agree, no, not really. Clearly, why do we still have such extreme poverty after the Millennium Development Goals? Why do we have still this significant hunger and overweight and obesity. That said, it is a moment to garner attention to somewhat of a neglected area. And we now have the COP meetings, the climate meetings that have become incredibly important, and governments are very concerned about climate and they are making commitments. But I want to see this UN Food System Summit as one that gets traction the day after and has meaning the day after. And we have to hold those who make bold commitments at this summit to account. We're hoping that the framework, the dashboard, other initiatives that keep track of evidence and track data can be one way of holding those who can take action in the food systems to account. Am I being negative?
Well, we try to strike the balance between realism and optimism, of course. And I think that the framework in itself is a work of optimism, setting out such a framework that hopefully does that most important thing, right? Make it happen, and that day after, because as you say, there's been a lot of talk and very little on the ground action.